We talk a lot in our industry about culture, about leadership, about staff development, but today we're really going to tackle those things head on in a little bit of a different fashion. I'm bringing on a friend of mine, a mentor of mine, a guy named Jimmie Williamson. He is very, very smart, and he has not spent his career in hospitality like many of us. I spent a lot of time in academia, worked a lot in healthcare, and now he's moved over into hospitality, and I think he brings a unique perspective. I think he's able to look objectively at our industry and bring a lot of other ideas, bold ideas from other areas into what we do here. What he's doing, how he's helping his company, LTC Hospitality, down in South Carolina, is really special. He's taught me a ton. I'm constantly learning from him, and I hope you can learn from him, all on today's episode of Restaurant Strategy. There's an old saying that goes something like this: you'll only find three kinds of people in the world: those who see, those who will never see, and those who can see when shown. This is Restaurant Strategy, a podcast with answers for anyone who's looking. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. My name is Chip Close, and this is Restaurant Strategy, a podcast dedicated entirely to the hospitality industry. We cover marketing, operations, and everything in between. Each week, I leverage my 20-plus years in the industry to help you build a more profitable and a more sustainable business. Did you know, though, I also work directly with operators all over the world through my group coaching programs to help you address and overcome the specific challenges we face in our industry. Curious to learn more? Then set up a free 30-minute strategy session at restaurantstrategypodcast.com/schedule. I promise I can show you how simple it can be to run a profitable restaurant. Again, restaurantstrategypodcast.com/schedule. As always, you'll find that link in the show notes. Thousands of restaurants across the country use Kickfin to send instant, cashless tip payouts directly to their employees' bank accounts the second their shift ends. It's a really simple solution to a really big problem. Because let's face it, paying out cash tips to your workers day after day, shift after shift, is kind of a nightmare. Tedious tip distribution takes managers away from work that matters. It's hard to track payments, which leads to accounting and compliance headaches. Plus, cash tip outs create the perfect opportunity for theft. And guess what? There's never enough cash on hand to actually pay out the tips, so managers are constantly having to make bank runs. Bottom line, there's never been a secure, efficient way to tip out until now. Meet Kickfin. Kickfin is an easy-to-use software that sends real-time, cashless tip payouts straight to your employees' bank accounts 24/7, 365 days a year. Tipping out with Kickfin gives managers and operators hours back in their day. It makes reporting a breeze and protects your business from mistakes and theft. And guess what? Employees love it, so it's one of the best recruiting tools out there. Best of all, restaurants can have Kickfin up and running overnight. Employees can enroll in seconds. There's no hardware, no contracts, and no setup fees. Get in touch today for a personalized demo and see how restaurants and bars across the country are tipping out with Kickfin. Visit kickfin.com/demo. As always, that link is also in the show notes. My guest on today's show is an educator, he is an administrator, a noted author, and a natural-born leader. He's also one of the most generous guys I know, and though he is a client of mine, he's become something of a mentor to me. He's a natural-born leader who's made it his life's work to help educate and empower those around him. Jimmie Williamson, Ph.D., welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chip. That's very kind.
No, I've adored the relationship we've built over the last couple of years. You've sort of come to this industry in an unusual, taken a circuitous route to get here, and I think I've said this before to other people on the podcast. I think that gives you a unique perspective. I think you're able to be objective about the industry when you come in and you're like, "Hey, that doesn't make sense. Why are we doing it that way?" Because oftentimes I think a lot of what we do doesn't quite make sense. Among all the many things you do, right? So we met through your work with LTC Hospitality, which is a growing restaurant group, growing rapidly, based down in Columbia, South Carolina. But as I mentioned, your career hasn't really been spent in hospitality. So if you can, to help give context for the listeners and the viewers, explain what you've done, and because you've done a lot, so we'll get to all of that if you can, and then finally explain how it is you came to the restaurant industry.
Absolutely. Well, I'm old, and so I won't bore the people with everything, with my entire biography. But I will say that I'm very blessed and very lucky to have probably be in, I guess now, a third career. You know, my first and primary career was in higher education. I spent the bulk of my formative career in higher education, mostly in the community college setting. I had the good fortune of leading 2 institutions here in South Carolina, and then actually made the transition into healthcare because of some research background that I had in my graduate studies. Interestingly enough, with the same principles, the individual and the family who owns LTC Hospitality Solutions also owned the healthcare side. So I've been with the company for a number of years. And so I made the leap into healthcare and then got summoned back to higher education. I actually was able to be the leader, the CEO and chief executive officer and president of the South Carolina Technical College System, which was responsible for all 16 technical colleges in the state of South Carolina. And technical colleges here are basically comprehensive community colleges, so people can relate to that. And then was recruited to North Carolina to lead the North Carolina Community College System, which was a network of 58 community colleges, just an incredibly complex system, 750,000 students, 250,000 faculty and staff, $91 million budget. I mean, it was a lot. Mm-hmm. And I just... honestly, the opportunity presented itself so that I could step back away from that and come back with LTC, and I did. And at about the same time, the company was opening restaurants, and so then COVID hit, and that's when I really got involved with. I was working on the healthcare side and continue to work on the healthcare side. I am a licensed social worker and do counseling and psychotherapy on the healthcare side. In fact, my afternoon is full of patient visits today, right. In this same kind of format, this same telehealth kind of format. Right. But I was asked to pull some of the things that had been successful in the healthcare side and bring that over to the hospitality side. And I have really loved being in the hospitality sector. Great people, wonderful work ethic, and it's all about really enhancing an experience, which the principles were the same, whether you were welcoming a student to the campus or meeting with a member of the General Assembly or just inviting someone into your home. All these principles I've lived with all these years, and then being able to bring that to the formalized hospitality side is quite interesting. So
there are a lot of overlaps, obviously. I mean, we're talking about service. We're talking about being a good host. You are naturally a good host, which I think doesn't necessarily come naturally for everybody. But I think a lot of the people listening to this podcast can certainly relate, because I think we like people. I think we like being able to take care of people and serve people and show them what we do well, and we want to see a smile on their face and all that. And I like that you drew the comparison to education. Certainly, right? We're trying to serve them in some way.
Sure.
Same thing, certainly on the healthcare side, right? You're serving them in some way, and now in hospitality. Talk to me about, because I want to spend a lot of time today talking about leadership, because leadership in education is really, I know, sort of at the core of what you do and what you believe, at least in the couple of years that I've known you. So talk to me about what makes a great leader.
I think that you really sort of hit the nail on the head when you talked about being in service to other people, and it brings me to something that I strongly believe in, and that is servant leadership. To whom much is given, much is expected, and I have been very blessed, both in terms of being able to pursue the kind of career that I wanted, the kind of education that I was able to achieve, and have been given incredible opportunities along the way. I used to say that it was all about kismet, sort of being at the right place at the right time, and that serendipitous moment. And then I stopped and thought, that maybe that's true, that it was a serendipitous moment along the way that I ended up in a position that ultimately benefited my career. But I also realized as I reflected on that yes, you have to be in the right position at the right time, but you also have to have the right credentials, and you have to be prepared to step up and take that challenge. And so using all of that and translating that into what does that all really mean? It means that you have to give back. And so I'm at the point in my life and in my career that and I realized this mid-50s that really my greatest legacy would be to mentor and to have another set of leaders come along and have that leadership legacy. But you have to have that servant's heart, and you have to do it humbly, and you have to do it without any want of recognition or fame or whatever. You have to do it for all the right reasons. So I think when someone, there are a number of things I think that make a good leader. Having vision and being able to articulate that vision, but also knowing that the value of any organization is truly the people. That's you hear it. It's sort of a cliche. You hear it all the time. Our greatest asset are our people, and that really is true. We couldn't open the doors of a restaurant without our staff, without our very talented chefs and people and bartenders, people who are working towards making that experience optimal. And the same is true was true in higher education. The same was true in healthcare. We had to recognize the experts and give them the opportunity, empower them to be a leader, to support them along the way. Scott Middleton, and I will refer to him often because he's the owner of the company, the founder. And he's always given everyone the opportunity to fail once. You fail once, you learn from it, you try anything, and if it works, fine. If it doesn't, you just scrap it and move on. And I think that empowerment, that sense of empowerment, really has helped people grow into their leadership ability. So a leader is a servant leader. A leader is someone who has vision. A leader is someone who has courage. In the leadership legacy by Posny and Kuntz, they talk about courage being the greatest virtue, and that it does take courage to make a bold decision or to step out on a limb, to commit financial resources, to commit human capital resources, to some new project. And so you have to be bold, and you have to be willing to take a risk.
So you said a couple of words there. Yeah, I think it's great. So you said vision, which I completely agree with. We're talking about education and empowerment. I mean, really, right? So this is where we're going. You make sure you educate people as to where you're going, and then you empower them to do the things that they need to do to help get you to where you're going, right? Those three are sort of a natural triangle for me when I think about leadership. But you also said a really important word, which is the importance of articulating vision. That number one, you have to have a vision. You have to know what you're all about, why you exist, where you're going, all of that. But then being able to articulate that, right? This is great coaching, right? We think we're coming up, as we're recording this, we're coming up to Super Bowl Sunday. Right? It's one thing to have great ideas. It's another thing to get 53 players all going after the same game plan. And when you run a play, there are 11 players, and everyone has to know exactly what they're doing so that they understand how they're a cog in a larger machine with a very specific goal to get the ball further downfield. That what great coaches do is have vision and then articulate that. Talk to me about articulation, because this doesn't, communication is a very precious skill, and it doesn't come naturally to people. How did you learn that? I'll start there. How did you learn sort of that 1-2 punch?
I guess it all started in my undergraduate career, because I embraced student leadership positions and was ultimately elected, the president of the student senate, and had to get people moving in one direction. And I will tell you that my real world professional analogy there was when I was president of the technical college system, 16 college presidents sitting around a table, 17 if you counted me, 17 really big egos. They don't get there. They don't get there just by being a milquetoast leader. They get there because they've worked hard and they are very dedicated to what they're doing. But getting them all to be moving in the same direction was very important. Same is true in North Carolina. I was only there about a year, so I didn't really have an opportunity to develop those long-term relationships like I had in South Carolina. But I will tell you that you'd get about 3/4 of the people. Say if we were and at that level, a lot of your time is spent on raising money and trying to get funds and resources into the university. And you have to do that in a variety of ways. One of which is you have to court the legislature, and you have to be in Columbia and in front of them so that you get your share of the pie. And so, but what we realized early on as a system, even when I was a president, was that it was much more effective to have one unified message rather than 16 colleges going to their particular General Assembly member and saying, hey, we need this. So we really did funnel all of those requests into one legislative agenda. And to get to that point was always very difficult. There were a lot of backroom, okay, here's what we need. We need these resources. I'm starting this program. The economy in Charleston needs an aviation center. That was, at that point, Boeing had just announced that they were going to be making the Dreamliner in Charleston. I was part of the team that helped to recruit Volvo to Charleston. And then we had also been successful in landing the Mercedes Sprinter van coming to Charleston. And so the technical college piece of that was that we provided all the education and training, the specialized education. But in order to do that, you had to have equipment, you had to have space. And so in Charleston, we realized very early on that we had to have an aerospace mechanical engineering building that was dedicated to nothing but training in the aerospace industry and in the transportation industry. Right. And so that became a legislative request. It was a $25 million project that got embedded in our overall request to the General Assembly. Well, again, you go back to that, everybody, 16 people sitting around the table, and somebody's going to feel slighted. They're going to feel like, well, I didn't get the money for my culinary program, or I didn't get the money for this or whatever. And so the president's job was really to be the peacemaker and to say, okay, we recognize that this is a priority for the system, but what can we do to make sure that everybody buys in, and that even though I may not be getting exactly what I requested, I'm going to support my colleague over here, and because my turn may be coming up in the next legislative year. And so you start out with hammering out the long-term vision and what the ask is going to be. But then I spent countless hours one-on-one with people. One particular president, trying to get him on board. I'll never forget, sometimes you just have to get in the car and go to that person and say face to face, What is it? What is it that you need? How are you feeling? How can I be the one to bring you on board? So ultimately, we do get to all 16 being on the same page, but it's a process. It is and you cannot dismiss the interpersonal communication piece, and trying to understand, seeking to understand what the person wants and what they're bringing out of that particular experience. So, there are a variety of ways. I would stay in constant contact. I was in Columbia. They're spread out all over the state. At the end of every legislative day, I'd send a very brief email. This happened in this committee. Nothing happened. We had phone calls, scheduled phone calls that would be check-in calls, and we had those at the beginning of the week because these are the committee meetings that are coming up. I also had to coordinate the work of all the lobbyists, trying to make sure that our lobbyists are actually communicating the need that we as a system had. So there were a lot of moving parts, and it's sort of like spinning plates. Sometimes you try to keep them all going in the right direction.
Well, as you say this, and everything you're describing feels in many ways so far removed from what we do in the restaurants, and yet all I could think of is that we're replacing, the 16 school presidents and replacing them with 16 chefs in the different units. Certainly any multi-unit operators here will understand that. Or 16 general managers who are responsible for a series of units. Or 16 servers who are on your staff. Or 16 cooks. So you communicate the vision. Say, this is where we're going, right? This is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. But then one thing that's really interesting is that, sometimes you just have to go to them, right? In your case, you had to get in the car and go drive to the other side of the state to have that face-to-face contact. And I think the analogy is valid. Sometimes you have to go to some of these people, and, implied in everything you just said there is that I think a really great leader, and the ones I've learned from so much, and you have certainly taught me this, as I continually try to get better in what I do as a coach and a consultant, is that a great leader does a lot of listening and is willing. You talked about Scott Middleton, certainly the guy at the head of the pyramid there at LTC Hospitality, your boss, my boss. And what I always marvel at him is that he has very strong opinions, but he also doesn't micromanage. He really hands off, lets a lot of people do things. There are times where he will step in and say, no, I want this, I want that, I want that. He will have very specific opinions. But I got to say, like 80-90% of the time, he lets people free to do what they do. And when he comes in and criticizes people, this is one of the things that I've told him this, when he criticizes people and somebody sort of responds and sort of tells him he's wrong, if he's wrong, he's the first one to say, oh, well, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry. Okay. I appreciate that. As fired up and as energized as he can be, he's just as quick to say, oh, okay. Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Continue on. I'll mute. We're on a conference call with, 20 people on a call, and he's the first. And I think that's a rare quality.
I agree.
And I just, and the two of you are both, key leaders in this organization, and you lead very, very differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so that's been a lesson as well. But you both listen. You do a lot of listening. So talk to me about that, because now if we can bring it a little bit in towards the restaurants, right, which is how do you coordinate? Because you have to wrangle multiple units. There are many different concepts under the umbrella of LTC Hospitality, and it's growing all the time. Not only different concepts, but different kinds of concepts. There's fast casual, there's fine dining, there's a brewery coming, with 600-seat brewery that's coming online any minute now. So talk to me about how you set forth vision, and then how you listen, and then talk to me about how you coach other leaders to do listening as well, to do that servant leadership thing you talk about so much?
Well, in order to listen, you have to be present. I think that's important, and not just physically present, but really connected to people. And you do that by developing relationships. Whenever we get a new manager, I always like to go in and just talk to the person and find out who they are. And we have, just as I'm sure it's true with many other large enterprises, we have a lot of people coming and a lot of people going, and so you have to try to keep those interpersonal relationships going. That's important. You mentioned that Scott is empowering, and he really is. And I think it goes back to something that we all early on sort of adopted, which was the concept of trust but verify. I'm going to trust that you're going to do this, but I'm going to verify that actually those kinds of things happened. And you get more energy and creativity out of someone when they feel like that you are personally connected to them. So I try to teach other people when general managers or managers have issues with a particular employee. My first question always is, have you talked to them? Have you discussed this with them? Have you made the point of having a private conversation if there's someone who is giving you a problem? I remember when we ran assisted living and skilled nursing facilities, we had to coach those administrators on not jumping to conclusions. Someone called out and they're ready to fire the person. Well, did you ever really stop to think? I mean, some people, one CNA was in the hospital. They were ready to fire her but she was in the hospital. I mean, you have to really... You have to be intentional about your listening. And sometimes, and this is something that I struggle with as an individual, is not talking over people. Actually stopping, letting them express what they're feeling, and then pick up the conversation and you say what you want to say. And I think too, when I talk about listening, on all these calls that we have, and we have 20 to 30 people sometimes on some of these calls. Right. And on the healthcare side, we have as many as 70. So we have to be very, very careful with the time that we spend on the air, consuming the airtime, but we also have to be very careful about what we say, because if we say one thing wrong, it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. So you have to be really clear. But I remember we had a conversation with one of our restaurants, and the chef was just, you could hear it in his voice. He was getting more intense. He was having some real major issues with staffing. And he felt as if no one was hearing him. And so I happened to be in town that day right after the call. I went to him specifically and said, I hear you. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. And other people have heard you. And so we are working diligently to try to get you the help that you need. So you can pick up things in people's voices. When you are with someone face to face, you can pick up on their body language. You have to be in tune to all of that, because what is the old cliche? What you're not saying is so loud that I can hardly hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, it's so there is, again, this relationship between all this stuff we're talking about, between setting a vision, making sure everybody's on board, and then the thing that I keep coming back to in this conversation as you're talking here is the need. We're so busy in what we do in our daily tasks, right? That we have to open up at a certain point. There's a certain amount of things that have to get done. We got to check. There's a million things to do. This is something you taught me, right? With the tyranny of the urgent often crowds out the important. Right. And I went back, read the pamphlet. It's great. I quoted my book that's going to be released later this summer. It's so true that the urgent often crowds out the important if we let it. And especially we're guilty of that in the restaurant industry because food's up, it's hot, we got to get to a table, right? Somebody's complaining, they need their food right now. They got to go to a show, we got to get them their check right now. That's urgent, and that has to get done. Some of those things are both urgent and important, but sometimes sort of the minutia of the day crowds out just something as simple as checking in and being present, like you said, which is perhaps the most important thing because we can't do it alone. Right? We open a restaurant. Let's say I open a restaurant. I cannot possibly do it alone because I can't, clean the floors and set the tables and wait on every table and cook every dish and clean every dish afterwards and serve it and clear it away and count the money and make the drinks and serve the drinks. I can't. It's stupid to even pretend that I could. So we need our people and we've got to get buy-in. So we have to set a vision, articulate that vision. It's everything we've said, and yet the thing that always seems to fall by the wayside is how we cultivate talent, right? How we find talent, cultivate talent, develop that talent, and allow them to grow and make us better than we ever were. And it sounds cheesy and very Pollyanna, right? Our people are our most important thing, but it is what we do is a people business. We hire people to take care of other people.
We do. It's all relationship based, relationship based. And we talk about establishing that relationship with our customers and wanting those repeat customers coming back. And that's a relational kind of exchange. But that relational exchange exists between owner, operator, and employee as well. I mean, it's something that cannot be discounted. People need to know that they've been heard. And I've been reminded of this. I did a presentation on conflict resolution last week, and I was reminded of the fact and reminded myself that as a college president, I used to always have an open door policy. And some of my vice presidents were like, hey, we can handle those things for you. You don't have to deal with this. But if a student was really complaining, and maybe they had attempted to go through the process to get their issue resolved, and they just weren't getting any satisfaction, I always told my administrative assistant, schedule a time, let them come in. 99% of the time, they just wanted to be heard. I would ask them at the end of of any session, what action would you like for me to take? Most of the time, they said, you listen to me. I wanted somebody to hear me. And so things got resolved,
Now, POPMENU has reimagined the restaurant. They're breaking the mold of the menu, taking the kitchen doors off the hinges, and serving up their most comprehensive technology solution yet, POPMENU Max. It comes with the previous ingredients that we've mentioned here on the podcast, right? Websites designed with SEO, marketing tools to help keep you top of mind with guests, and of course, the patented interactive menu technology. But this new recipe brings automated phone answering, third-party online order aggregation, waitlisting, and more to the table. POPMENU's phone answering technology, for example, has your ringing phones covered. With artificial intelligence, the simple questions that keep your phone line tied up can now be handled without pulling a staff member from your in-person hospitality. No more missed reservations, no more people asking you for your hours or missing revenue, and that's just the beginning. You have a passion for food, POPMENU has a passion for technology, and together it's a recipe for restaurant success. Now, even more digital ingredients are in their technology pantry, and POPMENU is helping restaurants attract, engage, remarket, and transact with their guests on a whole new level. Trust me, if you're a restaurant owner, you need POPMENU to take your business to the next level. For a limited time only, you get $100 off your first month, plus you get to lock in one unchanging flat monthly rate. Go to popmenu.com/restaurant strategy to claim the offer. Again, that's $100 off your first month by visiting popmenu.com/restaurant strategy. As always, that link is in the show notes. Well, it's so funny. One of the things that I've learned, and certainly you have taught me this, and then I've picked it up from others as well. But this, and it's called different things, but like the 1-3-1 rule, right? Mm-hmm. Come in with one problem, 3 suggested or 3 potential solutions, and 1 recommendation. This is a problem. These are 3 ways we could solve it. And of those 3, this is what I think we should do. Sure. And it's such a powerful thing to get your staff thinking that. As leaders, I think, certainly when you're at sort of the towards the top of any pyramid, you're sort of thinking that in terms, right? You're like, oh, this is a problem. What could we do? Or this is what we'll do to try it. Or we'll try this as a solution. We're doing that sort of whether we realize it or not. And so one of the things that I like is formalizing it. Just and I've said this so I was just in St. Louis this past week visiting a client, and it's one of the things that we were talking to the different managers to empower them. And man, when they realized how much agency they had on any given day regarding any specific problem, like, hey, if there's a problem, come here with 3 suggested solutions and the 1 recommendation that you would make. And then the leader, the owner, the chef, whoever mulls it over, and ultimately it's their decision. But 9 times out of 10, if the leader has surrounded themselves with people they know and trust and believe in, they're going to say, great, I trust you, go and do that. And and what a cool thing that becomes to watch a staff, and you watch it, you see it in their eyes light up, and they say, oh man, I can fix this stuff right away. I don't have to just sort of circle and complain, which is what I think we're often guilty of, certainly in the restaurants.
Well, and it's such a relief for the manager, the leader, for someone to come with that well thought out plan. I think that we're all conditioned to think that we're the fix-it people, and so we, you bring me a problem, I've got to fix it. That was the whole thesis in Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. Men think that they have to be the fixers, and sometimes the female says, "Don't fix it, just listen." But it's very relieving for the leader, for the manager, whomever, to have empowered people who are coming to them and saying, hey, you don't have to shoulder all of this burden. I've given this some thought. And this, in my professional opinion, is where we need to go. That is such a great feeling when you know I want to highlight.
Yes, I want to highlight what you just said there, because it invites us to have the next part of this conversation, which is, what is a leader and what is a leader for? And I think a leader is not the one to necessarily do it all and make all the decisions. And certainly, I think a lot of people listening to this episode can relate to that. Certainly, there are a lot of owner-operators. A lot of independent owners are also operators, and they feel like they have to do everything, be there all the time, show that they're willing to, roll their sleeves up and get dirty and make decisions and all of that. And I think what you're suggesting, and sort of where this conversation is going, is that that's not necessarily what a leader does. So what then does a leader do?
It goes back to the greatest legacy that you can leave is to have people who can step in and make things work when you're not. It has always been a goal of mine, and I think it's a goal of Scott's as well. When we take a vacation, we truly take a vacation. And you've got to get away, and you've got to believe that all the hard work that you put in empowering these people and teaching them and giving them the opportunity to be successful, all that's going to happen and occur while you're gone. And when you come back and there have been no major issues because people have stepped in, that's really a remarkable kind of thing. I remember the one example of that is when Scott and his whole family, and they're all involved in the restaurants, they left to go on a vacation. I think they were in Hawaii. They had not been on vacation in a while, and they were going to be gone 2 or 3 weeks. Well, this was about the time that COVID had been suppressed, and then it had a resurgence of, I guess maybe it was the Omicron variant or one of the others.
I do remember that, yep.
And we had, you remember, I think you were involved in some of this too. We had one restaurant that we had no servers. I mean, basically, we had no servers for the weekend because people had tested positive. And so we then had to step in and make some hard decisions. You go to a limited menu. You go to, you start pulling people in from all the other different entities. And I actually said to my son, who worked in the company at the time, we're going to Columbia and we're going to be a host, or we're going to be bussing tables, or whatever it is that we need to do, we're going to do it. And the message that I was sending, clearly I was communicating to the Middleton family, but the message that I was sending every time I had communication was, we've got this handled. We're not going to, don't worry. Be on vacation,
Yeah.
And we survived. And so I think that you have to empower people to make those bold moves and to keep the boat in the water. And honestly, sure, if you make a decision, if somebody makes a decision and it was not a good decision, at least they were making a decision. They felt empowered enough to at least make a decision. Now, it might not have been the right one at the time, but that's a teachable moment. That's when you can say, okay, now in retrospect, it might have been better to have done it this way, So it becomes a teachable moment if they make a mistake. So you try to minimize those mistakes.
Yeah. So I think this is a great opportunity to sort of drill down. So we started wide, we started broad, sort of speaking about leadership and education. And I think all of this really makes sense. And I think we came across some really important insights. Now I want to drill down and get specific. And I want to talk about LTC Hospitality, because you guys, Scott doesn't come from restaurants. His children who help oversee the company with him, they don't come from restaurants. You don't come from restaurants. And yet you employ a bunch of people who have made a career in restaurants. You invited me in, and I coach with the teams every week, and I have built a career in restaurants. And one of the very cool things is that you guys do things very differently, partially from pulling from your, I think, experiences in healthcare. I think partially from other sort of big businesses, certainly your background in education. I want to talk specifically, because I think this is something you've done really well, which is identifying leadership talent in young employees and developing leadership skills. So how have you personally, or how has the company approach that? Because like you said, there's a lot of churn in restaurants. People are always coming and going. And yet the need for a company that is growing from 2 units to 3 units to 5 to 7 to, I don't know, what's it going to be, 8 by the end of 2023? It's going to be a lot. What have you guys done? Because you've been very purposeful about it. So talk to me a little bit about how you identify and develop young talent.
And it's a multi-dimensional approach. You can't just depend on one silver bullet. In terms of, let's start with the beginning, and that is attracting. We operate on the assumption that we always have open positions. If someone wants to apply for a position, then certainly we are always hiring. And we really subscribe to the Jack Welch philosophy of differentiation. I know we've talked about this before, and it's the 70-20-10%. 20% of your employees at any given point in time are really the ones who are the movers, the shakers, the ones who are the leaders, and they're going to take your company to the next level. That 20%. 70% of the employees at any given point in time are the ones that show up and do their job. They're dependable, but they're not necessarily thinking beyond where they currently are. But that's good. They're solid workers, and you have to appreciate what they're bringing to the equation. 10% of the population, 10% of your workforce, if they didn't come in, if they called out and never came back, you wouldn't miss them. So we tell managers, we tell leaders all the time, always think about if you're putting up with someone who is less than exceptional, then and someone else comes through the door. Why would you not talk to them? Why would you not offer them a position? And we have brought people on because we recognized in them some quality that told us that they had great leadership potential, either in a past experience that they've had, or they have a combination of skill sets that we need at that particular time. And we'll bring them on and say, right now we're just going to put you in this slot, and we don't know exactly where you're going, but we want you on the team. It's all about getting people on the bus too, going from good to great. And
that's what I was thinking.
And sometimes, we shift people. Somebody comes along, and we've hired someone as a bartender, and they do a great job, and they're bringing a lot of energy to it. I'm thinking of one individual in particular, and then you realize they can be a great bar manager. Well, then they could be a great restaurant manager. Now they're at the corporate level, and they're handling HR, and they're handling a lot of different things for us. But we brought that person on as a bartender, but we recognized pretty early on that this individual had great talent. And so I think it's really paying attention to what they're doing and how they're performing their job. You've got to identify, so always having an open door in terms of being able to accept applications. And I know we've all gone through a lot of troubling and trying times trying to get staff and have staffing where it needs to be. But I think that when we start to articulate our benefit package, which is very different. You mentioned that we're very different. We run a track system. We have two managers that are sharing a track, and the way it's arranged, a manager can actually have a weekend off. They can have a Friday, Saturday, Sunday weekend off. And
I just want to pause right here because I want to highlight this, because this is something that you guys do that's very unique, that was new to me. So just to take one little step back, one of the key parts of cultivating talent who might want to grow within the company is to offer them the kind of workplace and the kind of opportunities that don't necessarily exist anywhere. And that's important because Columbia, for those of you who know it, is a college town. And like so many college towns, you get a lot of students, and they're transient. They work 1 day a week, 2 days a week. The next semester, their schedule's even crazier. They can't work at all. And then they come back in the fall, and then they want to work 4 days. I mean, it's just here, there, and everywhere. But your goal and the challenge is to find people in that market who want to work more, who want to continue to grow and develop. So when you talk about some of the benefits of, and we've talked about this on the show, why would someone want to come work here? Or why would this kind of person, a career-minded person, want to work here? This track schedule is really important. And just to highlight it, the track schedule works something like this, where somebody would work, tell me if I'm wrong, 5 days a week this week and only 3 days the following week.
Correct.
So for the 2 week pay period, it all balances out. You're working your set hours, but you work a heavy week and then a light week, a heavy week and a light week, and you're guaranteed every other weekend off. And to somebody who's been making a career in restaurants, and they go, wow, to reclaim every other weekend out of my year, yeah, that might be something worth pursuing. So specifically, you've sort of answered that question of what might make someone choose us over another restaurant or another restaurant group. And I really love it. I didn't understand it, but I sort of said that in the beginning. I said, I don't get it. I don't see how this is going to work. I think there are concerns, and certainly there are, but you guys have really perfected it, and it largely does work for you guys. So continue on. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to make sure that the listeners understood that.
No, and thank you for that clarification. I think that's important. And you make a good point. We are in a college town, and so we do have a lot of people who are seasonal. They'll come along with the semester or they leave for the summer. And what we have to be very mindful of too is that we don't staff our restaurants with all of those kinds of people. We're looking for career hospitality people. And so one of the things that I've been involved in is actually going to the University of South Carolina's Department of Hospitality and saying, hey, you need field placement for your students, we want to be that field placement. And so we have accepted students that way, and that's been very beneficial. We learned that in healthcare. We learned that if we connected with a college or university that was dealing in healthcare management, and we were able to get those people in, and we do it in all disciplines. Interestingly enough, I handle now on the healthcare side the social workers, and we have about 25-30 social workers that are working with us. But field placement is a big part of that degree program, and so we had someone. I have 4 students this semester for this year, and it gives you an opportunity to test drive an employee and offer them a position if you think they're going to be promising, but it also tells you who you don't want on your team. And I have one of those situations. This person is doing a field placement with me, and I know enough from that person's work ethic and background that we don't need them on the team. And so I'm not obligated to offer these people any position, but I've had the opportunity to sort of test drive them. So that was one approach that we used, especially for managers. You have to differentiate your job from other jobs because we're competing for a lot of the same workforce. You mentioned the track system. For a server or for a bartender, we do tip share, which is very different. A lot of people don't do the tip share program, but we guarantee a rate. If you come on with us and you are in tip share and you're just learning your job, we're going to guarantee that you have a particular hourly rate. And sometimes those hourly rates are very, very lucrative, especially for talented bartenders. The benefit there is that they could have been making all of this money around the holiday time, Christmas time. The people are coming in. There are a lot of parties coming in. Hopefully the people are very generous with their tips. But then for the server and for them to be able to have a quality of life that's important, we guarantee that rate, that hourly rate that they had in December, is also good for January and February when times are really tough. So that's an important thing. We also offer 401 matching K, 401 match, for the 401k program.
Yep. It's so when we talk about leadership and how we identify leadership and cultivate leadership, develop that leadership, I think it begins by creating the kind of environment where people would want to hang around. And that becomes, again, surely you hire students, you employ students from the university, and they just aren't interested in some of this stuff. But the people who have been around the industry long enough, who have said, I like this, I like it here, I could build my career here, I can have a nice living and provide for my family. I think you offer a really compelling thing. And, the benefits, just some of these basic things. I mean, health insurance and 401k and the match is great. And then this track scheduling is great. And the tip pooling, which can be very polarizing, but the tip pooling aligned with this the wage guarantee is like a whole other level. And there's things that you guys have done, and I'm glad we're talking about it here. There are things that you guys have done that most restaurants, most groups would never do, would never think to do. So it's, I offer this up as a consideration for the people listening here. You can think outside the box and certainly apply things from other industries. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just say, hey, I like the wheel that they invented over there. I'm going to try it on our car here, which is certainly what you guys did. I mean, this track scheduling is something that's been used in healthcare, and you just said, hey, will it fit on this car? Will it fit on hospitality? And is there a benefit? Will it give us some sort of advantage in our ability to acquire talent? And I think it's been really cool to see that. But you go beyond that too. So that's how you acquire talent. And talk to me. I know it, but I want you to explain it to the listeners. Talk to me about how you develop talent, because this has been your little pet project. Explain to listeners what you do and how it works.
Absolutely. So we believe that we have the good people on the bus. We want to keep them. You need to invest in them, and the way you invest in them is through education. I mean, we are an education driven company, and so we believe very strongly that we should give them the opportunity to learn and earn. And the way to do that, and we're borrowing from other industries. We're borrowing from manufacturing. The U.S. Department of Labor has a registered apprenticeship program. You can actually have your job title registered as a restaurant manager or as the very different levels, and won't get into all the technical part of that, but you can have that job registered with the U.S. Department of Labor, and there are a couple of requirements that you have to complete. You have to when you have people enrolled in an apprenticeship program, you have to offer them what we call didactic instruction, which is basically some level of instruction, either online. You can have them read a book. You can have them really adopt a certification. We build in, for example, ServSafe certification into all of our apprenticeship programs.
Yep.
We have benefited from your instruction, and we buy your instruction from your company, and you work with them about putting together the basics for restaurant management, and really you stretch their knowledge base, and you push that, and we see the benefit of that. So they have to have instruction. They have to have on-the-job training, and that's where they're mentoring with someone who is a senior member of the team, and you have to give them a raise. There has to be a wage progression, and so the employees that have been in this culinary apprenticeship program, they've benefited from a lot of instruction, and now they're completing it, and they're about to get a huge increase to their base. They're about to get a 5% increase to their base salary, and for a manager, that's pretty significant.
Yeah. So just to not to put too fine a point on this, but again, the government has programs where it says if you develop your team and promise to give them a raise at the end, there are then benefits that the company
That's right.
that the company gets. So talk to me, because that's really why you do that. You say, yes, we want to invest in our people, we want to develop them, and the employees do it because they get a raise at the end. But then you guys also benefit. I mean, it's really a win-win-win, because then you see certain benefits. Talk to me about that without getting too much in the nitty-gritty, but
Sure.
What are the benefits the company sees?
Well, and it varies state to state. But in South Carolina, the South Carolina General Assembly said if you have a registered apprenticeship program, it has to be registered with the U.S. Department of Labor. But if you have a registered apprenticeship program, we will give you a $1,000 tax credit for every individual that goes through that program. And so they're in the program 9 to 12 months. They graduate, they get their raise. We get $1,000 per individual tax credit on our state income tax, which is significant. When we had facilities, and in the healthcare day, we did have assisted living and skilled nursing facilities back in the day. Those have all been sold off, but we had as many as 2,600 employees company-wide. And so when you've got 500 people enrolled in an apprenticeship program and you're getting $500,000 annually in a tax credit, that's pretty significant. Yes, your labor costs are going to go up. However, you're going to recoup that because that person's going to stay with you. They're going to be loyal to the company, and you're going to stop the churn. You're going to stop the costs that are involved in recruitment and hiring and training and all those kinds of things. You're taking that piece away, but you're investing in the individual.
And it's really important to note, so this company, LTC Hospitality, you guys have put now, 50 or 60 of your managers across all of the different concepts through the program specifically. So any listeners to the show will know that I have an online course called Restaurant Recharge. And we make there's a live session component that we do where I meet with the students once a week to really hammer home, make sure we understand, and we make sure they understand the concepts and how it applies to the business. So they put people through the program. They end up getting reimbursed, through the tax. So not even on the healthcare side, okay, you put 500 people through, that's a huge number. But even just at the lower level in the restaurants,
Right.
putting 20, 30, 40 people, that's $20, $30, $40,000 a year, which for a lot of people listening to this is a very real number. And the benefit also on the backside, and we're seeing this now in real time with the managers who have gone through, for example, these apprenticeship programs, and the restaurant recharge is part of that, is that now they have a better understanding of how to manage proactively, how to manage profitably, and watching them flourish. I mean, the true definition of development, it's been so exciting to watch them come into their own, realize how much agency they have, and understand, it's like when you learn how to play chess and you say, oh my God, I could play this game forever. And
Right.
when your job becomes more than about dealing with customer complaints and doing voids and promos and turning on the lights and handling the bank drop, but when your job is really to hit revenue targets and to manage labor expenses and all of that, and create products, meaning food and drinks that will actually drive more revenue, your job becomes that much more fun. I know that's how I felt when I started learning some of these concepts, which is why now I pass them on. So all of that is that it's actually achieving the desired goal, which is to help them be better at their job and want to continue to grow within their jobs.
Absolutely, and we have seen the benefits of that. I mean, when you can take a manager who's been through restaurant recharge and really embraced the apprenticeship model, and it's very important for us as an ever-expanding company as well, because you mentioned the brewery, you mentioned other concepts that are restaurant concepts that are coming online. Something else that's happening, which we have not mentioned, is the acquisition of 2 golf courses, and so those golf courses have a restaurant component as well. Well, we're going to be able to take those people that we've invested in and immediately plant them in that new venture, and know that they, from the get-go, they understand profitability, they understand food costs, labor costs, all those kinds of things. They know how to apply those models to whatever environment we put them in. That is invaluable. We can't grow if we don't have the people who can step into those roles and make it happen.
It's so true. I mean, over the course of this year, you're going to go from needing 3 general managers to 7 or 8. I mean,
yes, right.
Real leaders who can lead a staff of 30, 40, 60. In the case of the brewery, I mean, what's that going to be? 80 employees on any given pay period. That's a lot.
It is, and the thing that I find so refreshing about it is, and I know you've seen this, once they go through this program and they do feel that agency and they feel that investment, they start developing things on their own, developing spreadsheets that I think they've shared with you. They've taught you some things about how they're doing all these spreadsheets.
Absolutely.
And managing by the numbers, and to see that was a bartender that we made a bar manager and is now a general manager, and see his growth trajectory has just been phenomenal. It really is.
Yeah, the biggest thing I can say, and we're coming to the end of our time, and I want to be respectful of your time. The biggest thing I can say is that what you guys have done really well is really formalized education. You've formalized development. We talk about check-ins. Earlier in this conversation, we talked about listening, right? How do you formalize listening? How do you create the areas that, sometimes it is just making sure you're checking in with your team throughout the day, throughout the week, but also checking in through the training process, checking in a couple of times a year. Sitting down for formal employee reviews, annual check-ins, monthly check-ins, weekly check-ins with your management team, or you have your management team. Somebody's in charge of the host team. Somebody's in charge of the service team. Someone's in charge of the cook. Someone's in charge of the bar team, and delegating to them and say, hey, I would have check-ins with all your people at least once a week. And that doesn't have to be formal. What's formal is we're saying, I want you to do this. The capacity in which it happens can be very informal. But formalizing this programs, formalizing check-ins, presence, listening, and staff development. It's something that you guys have done out of necessity because you're growing so quickly that you've really needed to. But it's easier than you think. And again, it's back to that thing, right? The tyranny, the urgent often crowds out the important, and our people are so important. And if we say that, and if we believe that, which I think we all do, then we need to say, okay, then what do we need to do today? Right now, I'm finishing reading this book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, and it says, what's the one thing you need to do today that would make, that having done it would make everything else superfluous and unnecessary? What's the one thing that would get it done? And I think if you really think in terms of that, what do I need to do now to make sure I hit my goals this week, so that translates to the month, what's the one thing we can do? The one thing for me is formalize it in whatever way that means for you. To all the listeners out there, sit down, take 15 minutes of your life this week and say, hey, how can I formalize staff education, staff development, really identifying talent? That's something we don't talk about enough. It's one thing to try to acquire the talent. It's another thing to develop them, but how do you identify the people that are ready to move? And that's something I think we got to create the space in our lives. Otherwise, it's never going to happen.
That's true. You're absolutely right. It is a unique approach that we have employed, and I do hope that the listeners would be inspired by it. And if they wanted any technical help, working through you, I could be a resource for them. I've spent a whole career in helping companies get the workforce that they need and getting them trained. So when I look back at my higher education career, that's basically all we did. We looked at what companies needed. We were there ready with the prepared workforce. Yep. And then what did they need to keep them employed and to keep them relevant as industries change. So, and there are all kinds of government programs out there. I know I tried to share with you about how we were able to get some grant money, and the federal government gives grant money out like somebody's sticking dollar bills into a chain link fence. If you can catch it, you got it for that moment, but there might not be another dollar coming behind it.
Yep.
So you just have to be vigilant. So.
And there are, so in the point of that, right, is that there are resources, not always the easiest to track down, but there are resources. But at the very least, there are easy ways, and I hope that shined through in this conversation, that there are easy ways, as long as you make it important, as long as you put weight on it. Say, hey, we really need to acquire the right kind of talent. And hey, we really need a system. We want to get really good at identifying the people who want to move on. I used to do this. I used to have sit-downs twice a year with people, and it was a 5-minute, it wasn't this formal, just sit down. And one of the most powerful things you can do when you interview somebody and you do those check-ins is you say, how are things going? What's going on in life? Because we have to understand, and I think we know this somewhere in our brains, but a job exists to support a life. That if none of us had to work, if we were all independently wealthy, we would travel, we would go to the beach, we would do all the, you know what I mean? We work, all the fun stuff. We work because we need to support our lives. And hopefully we find joy and purpose in what we do. And I hope that for everybody listening. And I think many of the people out there listening do know that. It's just our job to help to get better, at that. And by understanding that a job supports a life, and so understanding what's going on in life to make sure that the job is still supporting that. Because guess what? Lives change. We grow, parents leave us, children arrive, we have houses and cars break down, we take the bus, we have bills that are unforeseen. All of these things in our job helps each of us support our lives. And if we can we can bring a little bit of empathy and presence and listen and be willing to ask questions and just listen to what's going on, we can hopefully provide the circumstances, the situation, the job that's right for them now, or the job that's going to be right for them in 6 months when the baby comes, or the job, or when the kid goes away to college and I'm going to have more free time because I'm now going to be an empty nester and I'm now ready for that next step. And just understanding that and communicating with it, that's just listening, which goes back to one of the first things you said on this call. And it can't be overstated enough how important that is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. We do have high expectations of our employees, but we also take care of them. And life does happen, and, their car breaks down or they're in a wreck or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we are very fortunate in that we have the resources to be able to step in and to help them, in some tangible way. Certainly we want to take care of the people who are taking care of our customers.
That's right.
And I hope that shines abundantly clear with them. And if you were to interview any of them, I would hope they would say the same thing, that they feel not only supported in terms of their professional growth, but also personally. So.
And the reality is, we could probably interview 30 of them, and we would not get 30 people who would say that way. But to one of your points is that we keep educating ourselves, we keep striving to get better, and we do better today than we did the day before, and that we don't have to be perfect right out of the gate, simply by trying, simply by making the effort, that hopefully we are doing the right thing in the eyes of our people more often than we're not, and we keep trying to get better. Hopefully 25 out of the 30 would say yes, and our job is by next month to get to 26 out of 30 and 27 out of 30, and simply you can't do it for everybody. We certainly know that. Anybody who works in this industry knows, but we can always try to get better and try to get that to 100% for sure. Jimmie, I appreciate it. If anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Because maybe they do have questions about some of the things that you guys are doing. What's the best way for them to do that?
Probably via email, J Williamson, WILLIAMSON at LTCHS.com, or they can get in touch with you and you can get in touch with me. How's
Happy
that?
to do that. You guys know my email. I give it just about every week. It's chip@chipclose.com. It's KLOSE. So if you want to do that, you want to come through me, I can put you in touch with Jimmie, or I will put the email address in the show notes, so you can get in touch with anybody you want to get in touch with, because they really are doing something interesting. If you just had questions about that, I think it's really generous of you to offer yourself up. I got 5 quick questions for you. You got time for 5 questions?
Sure. Yeah.
Great.
Sure.
These are fun. They're meant to be fun.
Okay.
First question, what's the last great meal you had?
Oh, wow. The last great meal.
And it doesn't have to be the fanciest meal. It doesn't have to be, you define it however you want to define it.
Over the weekend, there is a great little place that makes barbecue only on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Their barbecue is okay, but their barbecued chicken is just incredible. And so you don't go there and eat it. You get it. You bring it home. And my wife and I had been traveling for work over the weekend. We both got in on Saturday night. She went by, picked up some of this. You have to get on the list to get the chicken halves. And I ate it, and it was just it brought back so many good memories of other meals that had been shared with other people with that same sauce. It's all in the sauce.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. All right, second question. Mm-hmm. What's the last great hospitality touch you've had?
So my wife and I just booked a trip to Italy in September, and I did that through a travel agency, and I could not have had a more pleasant experience with the person booking that trip. He was incredible. Discovered as we were booking the trip that our passports had expired like 20 days before. So he was able to hold the spot for us. We got everything sent off and are waiting on new passports. But, what a great, it followed up with an email, followed up with a phone call, just really great, hospitable service.
Anything in particular, or just the attention to detail?
Just the attention to detail. And he was very pleasant and happened to know geographically where I was calling from and had some connection with the South. And this company is, I don't necessarily want to give out all the details here, but it's a great company to work with.
Excellent. Question number 3. If a genie came down and could grant you one wish as it relates to the hospitality industry, what would you wish for?
Ready and trained staff and abundant profits. And
wait, only one. You only get one.
Only one. Oh, wow. Okay. I don't know. Just to be successful and to make a difference.
Yeah. Okay. Number 4. What would you tell someone, you've gone through some openings, what would you tell someone who's about to go through their first restaurant opening?
Expect the unexpected. Delays are inevitable. Set a date and keep the date. Set a date and keep the date, which means that you may have to do a lot of really incredible jumping through hoops.
Okay. Love it.
And you might have to show up and set furniture up.
Yeah,
but that's
in
okay.
fact, you probably will have to.
Yes.
I always make a joke. I said, we're sweeping the last of the dust under the rug as the first person, as our first guest is opening the door. Just about every opening I've done, and I've done a bunch. It's always always the idea. And they hit the dining room, and everybody turns around and hides the broom behind your back. It's right. That's how it goes. Okay, last question. I want to talk about the future of restaurants. I want you to look 5 years down the line. What do you think is coming that other people may not see coming?
Oh gosh, well we're beginning to experiment with with robots, and it's not to replace servers but it's to be more efficient. And I think we were as we look at a 60,000 square foot brewery and being able to deliver on time and deliver the product to the customer in a very efficient way. I think that was what really began to drive us. I've become much more interested in artificial intelligence and modeling and what artificial intelligence how we can utilize artificial intelligence in the restaurant business. It's amazing that what AI can do. And I think that AI is going to take over much of how we deliver goods and services. And we can better predict things through AI and through modeling. I think we've got to be in tune to the technology.
I totally agree. I'm actually doing an episode. I'm working up an episode for just about a month from now. So a few weeks away, talking all about sort of AI, not the robotics as much, because I agree with you. I think it's coming. It's going to get better. I think it is going to be able to integrate smoothly in certain areas. But artificial intelligence and sort of what ChatGPT is doing, and now as Bing just sort of introduced their thing, and Google's going to, hard launch, wide release in just a couple of weeks, their tool. I don't think we quite know how to use all that, but I'm learning as much as I can. I'm talking to as many smart people as I can to try and better understand some of the applications of that. I would agree with you. I think that's a really, really good one. Jimmie, listen, I appreciate your time today. Any final words of wisdom for the listeners? You got a whole bunch of owners, operators on the listening. Any last final words for them?
Well, it's going to be a plug for you because I do think that if they utilize the resources that you bring to the table, you'll see a marked difference in your operations and particularly in your people and how they will grow and learn if they take advantage of what you have to offer. You bring such a wealth of knowledge to the table.
No, it's really sweet of you.
One of the smartest things we ever did, I think, was to engage you, and
that means a lot. That means a lot. It's really sweet, and I swear that's not why I brought him on here.
Right.
It wasn't meant to be a plug. I like the way Jimmie thinks, and I appreciate sort of your patience and your openness and your presence. It's sort of how we started the conversation. It's certainly something I'm trying to get better at as I try and be better for my clients and all that. But it's really kind of you to say. I appreciate that. Jimmie, enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Chip. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Once again, I want to thank Jimmie for taking time out of his day to sit and chat with us. Again, my email is in the show notes. His email is in the show notes. If you've got any questions for him about how they've applied for some of these grants, how they've integrated some of these apprenticeship programs and gotten tax refunds back, go take advantage of him. He's a resource of knowledge, not just for Recharge and how he's utilized some of the resources that I have, but all of the things they've done. Very smart guy. He's very generous with his time, and he's offered it up. I strongly recommend you take him up on that. Again, I appreciate you guys being here. I hope you got a lot out of this episode, and I will see you next time.